Hello and welcome to Moment of Truth on Labour Social. I'm Graham Hughes. Now, one of the things that was said before the Brexit fraudulendum was that if we voted to come out of the EU, investment in the UK would go off a cliff. And lo and behold, a recent report from UK and a Changing Europe has found that development funding from the new UK investment banks post-Brexit is 2/3 lower than what we got from the European Investment Bank before we decided to impose economic sanctions on ourselves. Funny that. For more than 40 years, the European Investment Bank provided funding for UK projects such as the Channel Tunnel, the Manchester Metrolink, offshore wind farms, and upgrading the national grid. The European Investment Bank invested an average of 6.4 billion in the UK between 2009 and 2016 in real terms, peaking at 7.5 billion in 2016, the year of the Brexit fraudulendum. In contrast, these new UK-only public sector lenders, created by the government since Brexit, invested just 2.4 billion last year, a third as much as the European Investment Bank was spending 6 years earlier. According to the co-author of the report, it's not clear that the UK's domestic development banks will be able to fill the hole left by the loss of access to the European Investment Bank by the end of the decade. They lack staff and experience, inhibiting them from scaling up operations quickly. They also don't have the coveted AAA credit rating of the European Investment Bank, and consequently they lend at higher interest rates, making it more expensive to lend to public interest projects. When we talk about public interest projects, we're often talking about infrastructure, and that's where the situation gets particularly dire. Between these new institutions, the Scottish National Investment Bank, the Development Bank of Wales and the British Business Bank, they have invested just 17% as much in infrastructure projects in 2022 as the European Investment Bank did before winding down its links with the UK because the ruling elites teamed up with every idiot and every racist in the nation and demanded that our economy stop growing because we've got more than enough money for everyone. Thank you very much. While the UK Investment Bank's chief executive, former HSBC boss John Flint, suggested that investment will accelerate in the coming years, the report from UK and a Changing Europe argues that, going forward, British investment banks will be constrained by the strict treasury limits on lending imposed to protect taxpayers' money. Because the reality is we are skint and our economy hasn't grown an inch in over 15 years, 13 of them under a Tory government. Public sector lenders, such as the European Investment Bank, are able to harness the lower borrowing costs and longer time horizons of governments to back projects that private investors deem too risky. However, the modest scale of these new UK-only institutions means that so far they've backed far fewer projects, and those projects have been smaller and lower risk than what was supported previously by the European Investment Bank back when we were one of the 3 senior partners in the richest and most successful comprehensive trade bloc in history, the European Union. Remember when you saw on the side of that bus that our membership of the EU cost us £350 million a week? That wasn't just the biggest lie ever told in the history of politics, but also the most expensive. The big lie of £350 million a week inflated our contributions by more than a quarter, but more importantly, it ignored the money we get out of trade, and investment as members of the EU, which worked out to roughly £2 billion a week. What the Remain camp should have had was a bus with membership of the EU gained us a whopping £91 billion a year net. Let's spend that on the NHS on the side of it. If only the leaders of the Remain campaign weren't painfully out of touch, privately educated toffs who secretly hated the EU and everything it stood for, eh?